Don't linger in the valley of indecision. You know, we've all been there. We've been faced with making a decision and we're really unsure of what to do. You're paralyzed by fear of making the wrong decision. And you know, I'm not talking about whether to wear a blue or green shirt. That decision isn't life-changing. Our son made a statement similar to this one several years ago, which I believe has biblical implications. He said, "Don't linger in the valley of indecision." So when considering this, let's not become paralyzed by indecision about following God's instructions. There are a number of biblical examples of individuals who missed significant opportunities due to disobedience, impatience, fear, or personal weakness. These stories serve as lessons for us today, reminding us of the importance of seizing God's opportunities. Whether overcoming personal challenges, listening to God's calling, or prioritizing spiritual growth over material gain, we can learn from these biblical characters and avoid missing our divine opportunities. Some of these people lingered in the valley of indecision or made incorrect decisions, which changed their lives forever. And here are some of the examples that we're familiar with. We know Moses. Moses led God's people from the grip of Egyptian bondage. And as they moved farther from Egypt, after having lived there for over 400 years, they complained because they were hungry and food was scarce. They complained about the lack of water that they had to drink. They wanted to return to Egypt where life was good. Well, it seems to me that their memory was pretty short. Moses overflowed in complaints, and he took those to God. And God provided the people with food, and he also told Moses to speak to the rock so that fresh water would flow and quench their thirst. Well, in his frustration, Moses struck the rock instead. Yes, water did flow, but God was not pleased that Moses hadn't followed his instructions. Moses made the wrong decision. Moses' story reminds us that even the most faithful leaders can falter. His mistake teaches us the importance of following God's instructions precisely, even when frustrated or under pressure. It also emphasizes that the consequences of disobedience can be significant, even for minor missteps. Next, consider the rich young ruler who came to Jesus by asking him what he should do to have eternal life. Jesus began to list the commandments given by Moses. Can't you see this man making a mental check marks by each of the ones when Jesus listed them? So as this happened, the rich young man probably felt pretty good about his position, thinking, I've kept all of those from my youth. But then, he did ask this most important question: what else do I need to do? First, perhaps thinking that he had left something out that was important. Although not condemning this man for keeping these essential items, Jesus went on to say, sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. And then follow me. Well, hearing this, the man became very sad because he was wealthy. This man was in a quandary, in the valley of indecision. His wealth and material possessions became a barrier and took priority over his spiritual growth. This young ruler's missed opportunity is a sobering reminder to examine what we value most and know that pursuing spiritual rewards takes precedence over worldly wealth. Our eternal happiness really depends upon it. We're also familiar with Jonah's story. God sent Jonah on a special mission to Nineveh to instruct the people on living the life that God had called them to. God told Jonah to go, but Jonah said no, thinking that he could escape from God. Jonah, paralyzed by fear, decided to go in the opposite direction. That didn't work well for him or for those with whom he shared his voyage to Tarshish. Discovering that Jonah was the cause of the tumultuous storm, the crew tossed him overboard into the water. Then the storm ceased, and Jonah became a meal for the big fish that God had appointed. So, after spending 3 days and nights in the fish's belly, Jonah concludes that he should have followed God's instructions, and he recognized that true salvation comes from God. So, from Jonah's example, we can see that when God tells us to do something, it's not just a suggestion. Therefore, we should never devise an alternative plan because God means exactly what he says. So by running from God's call, Jonah missed the opportunity to serve willingly as God's messenger. Although he eventually preached to Nineveh, his initial disobedience showed a lack of faith in God's plan. Jonah's story helps us to realize that we can never outrun God. His missed opportunity reminds us to trust God's plans, even when his plans challenge our comfort zone or preconceived notions. Well, these are only a few examples of people who hesitated to follow God's instructions. So, what's your hesitation? Or why are you undecided in following God's eternal instructions? Again, whether it's overcoming personal challenges, listening to God's calling, or prioritizing spiritual growth over material gain, we can learn from these biblical characters and avoid missing our divine opportunities. So this week, let me encourage you to think of the essence of our son's statement several years ago that said, "Don't linger in the valley of indecision." You know, it can apply to many decisions that we face, but especially when God has instructed us to follow him. That valley of indecision is no place any of us really wants to be.